about this month is silence, or rather the power of silence. And the first thought that may occur to all of us is, what's the best way of talking about silence? Keep quiet. That may be a good idea, but that is not actually what Bhagavan meant by the term silence. When Bhagavan was talking about silence, he obviously wasn't talking merely about vocal silence. In fact, sometimes if people wanted to take a vow of silence and keep silent for a certain period, Bhagavan said, what is the use of keeping the tongue quiet while the mind's chattering? So when Bhagavan talks about silence, he's not talking about verbal silence, is he talking about mental silence? Yes and no, not really, because the silence Bhagavan is talking about is not mental, it is beyond the mind. Would we say, for example, that sleep is a state of mental silence? Well, we could say so in a way, but that gives implies that sleep is a state of mind. But actually there's no mind in sleep. Sleep is the state where the mind is absent. So sleep is not really a mental state, so it's not really a state of mental silence. The silence Bhagavan is talking about is the silence, it's our real nature, which is the state in which there is no mind, no ego. But what disturbs silence is the rising of the ego. The first, all noise begins from the ego. The ego is, we can say, the root of all noise, the first noise. And as soon as the ego rises, it projects thoughts and phenomena. According to Bhagavan, everything that the ego experiences is just a thought. All the world we perceive, what we are perceiving, we infer the existence of an external world. But actually what we are experiencing is only images in our own mind. Visual images, sound images, these are all perceptual images which are experienced in our own mind. When we're dreaming, we seem to experience a world. It seems to us while we're dreaming, but we're perceiving a world outside ourselves. But as soon as we wake up, we recognize that the world we were perceiving was just our own thoughts, our own imagination. So also Bhagavan says, this whole world is nothing but thoughts, nothing but our own mental projection. So as soon as the ego rises, it projects phenomena, which are all thoughts, and we're in a state of, metaphorically speaking, we're in a state of noise as soon as the ego arises. Because it arises, it projects thoughts, and everything else follows from that. This is why Bhagavan said that his real teaching is not the teaching in words, but the teaching in silence. Because, as he said, words are the great grandchild of silence. Because from silence arises the ego. From the ego arises thoughts, and from thoughts arises speech. So whatever may be expressed in words cannot reveal the real nature of the source of the ego, its thoughts and its words. So Bhagavan's teaching, the teachings that Bhagavan gave us in words, they are pointers. In what direction is Bhagavan pointing us? Everything, the essence of Bhagavan's the gist of Bhagavan's teachings, the thrust of all his teachings is pointing us back to ourselves. Bhagavan is, whatever teaching he gives, it is the aim of it is to turn our attention back towards ourselves, because all problems arise because we've arisen as this ego. This ego is not what we actually are. As Bhagavan said, the ego is what rises as, I am this body, I am a person, I am Michael. That is the ego. But that which experiences itself as Michael or Barry or Guru Das or whoever, that is the ego. The I that says I am this or that, that is ego. But that is not what we actually are. The ego is a wrong identification. We identify ourselves with something which is not ourselves. We experience ourselves. Now I feel I am this body. If you ask where I am, I'm here. I'm sitting in this chair. I'm talking. I'm thinking some thoughts. What shall I say next? That I that is sitting and talking and thinking, that is the ego. That is not what we actually are. Because all these phenomena, this body is something that appears in the waking state. In dream, some other body appears and seems to be myself so long as I'm dreaming. In sleep, no body appears. Yet I'm aware in all these three states. It's I who am awake, it was I who was dreaming, it was I who was asleep. So the same I is there in all these states. But the phenomena come and go. In waking, one set of phenomena appear. In dream, another set of phenomena appear. In sleep, no phenomena appear at all. But whether phenomena appear or not, I am there I know that I didn't experience any phenomena in sleep. So I must have been there in sleep to be aware of the absence of phenomena. In fact, even to say I was aware of we know that we weren't aware of any phenomena in sleep. But strictly speaking, we were not aware of, we were aware of the non-existence of phenomena in sleep. But it's, it would be almost more correct to say we were not aware of any phenomena in sleep, but we're aware but we weren't aware of any phenomena in sleep. It's a bit difficult to express it because as soon as we say we're aware of the non-existence of phenomena, the non-existence of phenomena sounds like another phenomena, but it's not actually. In sleep, to use Bhagavan's cinema analogy, in sleep the screen is blank, no pictures are projected on it. In waking and dream, pictures are projected on it. And in waking and dream, the first picture that is projected is the ego, the one who rises and says, I am Michael, I am this body, I am thinking, I am doing. That is ego. That is what it never actually disturbs silence. Even now, we're in a state of absolute silence. But from the perspective of the ego, we seem not to be in a state of silence. So the ego is what obscures the silence. It doesn't actually hide the silence, because what silence actually is our own self. Silence is the real nature of what we actually are. Silence is what we actually are. So even now we're aware of ourselves. We're always self-aware. We're always saying I. But along with I, we've mixed other things. I am Michael. The I am is true. I am Michael is not true. So in the ego, there is an element of reality. That element of reality is the awareness of our own existence, the Sat Chit. But the whatever we identify with, that is false. So the combination of I am Michael, the whole thing is false, but there is this element of reality in it. And when the adjuncts, the things that I take to be myself, when the adjuncts slip off, as they do in sleep, what remains is silence. Sleep is a state of perfect silence. And that is our real nature, according to Bhagavan. So the silence Bhagavan is talking about is certainly not verbal silence, it's not even mental silence. It's the silence that exists before the mind arose, but is underlying and supporting the appearance of the mind, and that exists even when the mind is absent, just like the screen in the cinema. Therefore, what is the silence Bhagavan is talking about? In Maharshi's Gospel, there's a chapter, I think the second chapter of Maharshi's Gospel, is called Silence and Solitude. The first question Bhagavan is asked, I don't remember exactly what the question is, but what Bhagavan's answer amounts to is, I think he said the inner silence is self-surrender. That's the silence Bhagavan is talking about, is self-surrender. And then he says living without, the way it's recorded in English is living without the sense of ego is silence. What does it mean to live without the sense of ego? The ego is a wrong awareness of ourself. An awareness of ourself is something other than what we actually are. So the ego and the sense of ego mean the same. So basically what Bhagavan is saying, living without the ego is silence. And if we live without the ego, it's obviously the body can't be without the ego. The body appears to exist only when the ego rises. So living without the ego means just being as we actually are. That is silence. So it's the egoless state, our natural state of pure self-awareness. That is the silence Bhagavan is talking about. And only that silence can reveal itself. That is why Bhagavan said his real teaching is silence. The teaching he gave us in words is to turn our attention back towards ourselves. Because, as he explained, the ego rises by grasping things other than itself. In verse 25 of Urudunapti, he says, Urupatri undam, Urupatri nikum, Urupatri undu mika ongum. That means grasping form, it rises. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on form, it flourishes abundantly. Uru victu, uru patram. Leaving form, it grasps form. That means we leave one form, we grasp another form. So the nature of the ego is grasping form. And he ends the verse by saying, Uru vatra peya hande. Uru vatra peya hande means the formless phantom ego. So the ego has no form of its own, but it seems to exist only when it grasps other forms as itself. So because the ego exists only, can rise and stand only by grasping form, and because it itself is formless, if it tries to grasp itself, it subsides and disappears. Therefore, Bhagavan says in that verse, Tedinal otum pidikon. That means if sought, it takes flight. So this ego seems to exist only when we're attending to other things, only when we're aware of things other than ourselves. In other words, only when we're not looking at ourselves, but looking at other things, the ego seems to exist. When we look elsewhere, we seem to be the ego. If we look back at ourselves keenly enough, we will see what we actually are, and the ego will be destroyed forever. So the reason Bhagavan appeared in human form and gave us teachings in words was to turn our attention back towards ourselves so that we could investigate ourselves, see what we actually are, and thereby see. But what we always are is pure self-awareness, the nature of which is infinite silence, infinite and eternal silence. So even now we are that. All we have to do to see that we are that is to turn and look at ourselves. So long as we're looking into other things, we're not going to see what we ourselves actually are. We have to turn our attention back to inwards to see what we actually are. As Bhagavan said in verse 44 of Aksharam, Bhagavan expresses there what Arunachala taught him, which is Tirumbi ahandane dinamaha kankan terium Jnana and Arunachala. That means turning back within daily. Daily is a metaphorical way of saying constantly, persistently, see yourself with the ahakan. Ahakan means inner eye. The inner eye is obviously attention. So turning our attention back towards ourselves, terium. Terium means it will be known. So the way to know what we actually are is to turn our attention back to ourselves. And then Bhagavan ends by saying, Endranayan Arunachala. Endrana means you said. En means what? Meaning it's though it's just what. The implication is what a wonder. Simply by turning our attention back towards ourselves, we will see what we actually are. That is what Bhagavan said, that is what Arunachala said taught him. Arunachala is a mountain. How did Arunachala teach that? It taught it in silence. There's a beautiful verse of Sadhuvam. In one of his songs he sings, Amma Arunachala te parai summa irukudei adupol amandul ilka ase perukudei. That means, Amma, see Arunachala, Mother, see Arunachala. It is still, it is just being there. Summa irukudei means it's just being. Adupol amandul, like it, to be within, it's increasing, by seeing it, it increases the desire to be like itself within, just being. So Arunachala is the embodiment of silence. That is why the form of God that Bhagavan taught us, if we want an external form of God, Bhagavan pointed to Arunachala. This mountain is Arunachala. The significance of that is a mountain is something that is perfectly still, perfectly silent. So Arunachala is the embodiment of silence. So through silence, Arunachala taught Bhagavan, turn within and constantly see yourself, and it will be known. So that's what Bhagavan learned from Arunachala. That is what we learned from Bhagavan. Bhagavan learned from Arunachala in silence because he was already a fully ripe soul. He had been through all this process that we are going through now already, so he was fit to understand the silent message of Arunachala. Even before coming to the physical presence of Arunachala, the mere thought of Arunachala from afar was sufficient to establish Bhagavan in that state. So now we come to the topic of, I've talked about silence, but I was asked to talk about the power of silence. People often say, oh, Bhagavan's presence was so powerful. People came into Bhagavan's presence and people think that if you're in Bhagavan's presence, you'll attain Jnana. It's not as simple as that. I'm not saying Bhagavan's presence isn't powerful, but in order to understand, in order to benefit from the silence that is there in Bhagavan's presence, Bhagavan, just like Arunachala is the embodiment of silence, Bhagavan is also the embodiment of silence. But in order to benefit from that silence, we have to turn within, because we can experience silence only within ourselves. So there were many people who lived 40, 50 years with Bhagavan. Their ego wasn't annihilated. Bhagavan says in one verse in Guru Vachakagavai, Murugana records that Bhagavan said, there are some people who remain all their life in the presence of the Jnana Guru, but their darkness of their ego is not dispelled. That is like the darkness at the foot of a lamp. In old-fashioned lamp posts, the lamp will be on top of a post and there'll be a darkness around the foot of it. It's like that. So it's not the mere physical presence of Bhagavan that will annihilate our ego. If we are already following what Bhagavan has taught us, if we're trying to turn our attention within, then being in Bhagavan's presence will be an aid. But Bhagavan's presence, where is Bhagavan's presence? Is Bhagavan's presence just limited to that body that lived there in Tiruvannamalai for 54 years? If that were Bhagavan's presence, then Bhagavan that would mean his presence is limited, his silence is limited, his grace is limited. Obviously it is not. Bhagavan's silence is always there in our own heart. All we have to do is turn back within and look at it. And silence itself is grace. There's no, grace and silence are one and the same thing. In once someone wrote an article, I think in Vedanta Kesari or somewhere, in one magazine, they wrote an article where silence is an inspired sermon. It was an article about their visit to Bhagavan and how Bhagavan teaching is in silence. When that article was shown to Bhagavan, Bhagavan read it and then he wrote a one-line verse in which he defined what is silence. Monum ul erum orumori aronile. Yea. That means silence is the one language but rises within the state of grace. So silence is the real language, the real means of communication. But I mean, we use our verbal language to communicate what? About our thoughts, our feelings, about the things we perceive. But to communicate what we actually are, that can be communicated only in silence. So that is, all mori means, all means one, but it also means peerless. So language, silence is the peerless language, but rises within. That's if we turn our attention within, it will rise and consume us. It doesn't literally rise, that's again a metaphorical way of saying it, but when we subside, it, metaphorically speaking, it rises and consumes us. That is, according to Bhagavan, that is the state of grace. So that silence, that grace of Bhagavan is always there in our heart. All we have to do is turn within and look at it. In another verse in Guru Vachakabai Mudana records that Bhagavan said, people complain, oh, why God isn't gracious to me. But Bhagavan said the accusation of not being gracious can never be, we can never justifiably accuse God of lacking in grace, because God is always shining in us as the nearest and dearest. He's making himself so intimately available to us. Who is lacking grace? It's we who are lacking grace. What is required is not God's grace, but our grace. We need to turn our attention within. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa used to say, the grace of three people is necessary. The grace of God is necessary, the grace of Guru is necessary, and the grace of Jiva is necessary. Grace of God and Guru, who are actually one and the same, that is always available. What is lacking is grace of Jiva. So what Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said is exactly the same as what Bhagavan said. It's what are we bestowing our grace on? Our attention is grace. We are bestowing our grace on phenomena. That's why phenomena seem very big in our life. We experience so many things other than ourselves, and all these things seem very real. The world seems very real. Why? Because we are bestowing our grace upon it by attending to it. We have to turn our attention away from the world, away from all phenomena, back towards ourselves. That is bestowing grace on ourselves. And whatever because what attention is a selective use of our awareness. Now, there are so many things here, but we choose to attend to one thing. Now, probably everyone sitting here is attending to what I'm saying, unless you're falling asleep or getting bored or whatever. so okay, you choose to, but there's so many other things. You could be looking at Bhagavan's pictures, you could be looking at the flowers, you could be looking at the fruit, you could be looking out in nice sunny weather, there's a helicopter flying by there, so many things we could be attending to, but at any moment we select what we attend to. It's a selective use of our awareness, is what attention is. And awareness is, what is awareness? Now, what seems to be aware, what is aware of other things is the ego. But according to Bhagavan, that is not the real awareness. The real awareness is not the ego, which rises as I am this or I am that. The real awareness is I am. The self-awareness, the pure self-awareness, that is real awareness. Awareness of anything else is just an illusion. It seems to exist only in the view of the ego. So awareness it is said in one of the Mahavakyas, Prajnanam Brahman. So pure awareness is Brahman. So when we are attending to something, we are using our awareness, we're channeling our awareness towards something other than ourselves. And by channeling our awareness towards it, by focusing our awareness on that, we give it life, we give it reality. Things seem to be real because we attend to them. So the more we practice attending to ourselves, the more clear our self-awareness will become. So it's by persistent practice of self-awareness that we will eventually gain the clear awareness of what we actually are. And as soon as we're aware of what we actually are, the delusion that we have this ego will be dissolved forever. The ego will be eradicated. And when it's eradicated, it's not as if there was once an ego which has been eradicated. We will see that there never was an ego in the first place. But to see that, we have to see what we actually are. We have to turn within. And so when the ego is annihilated, what annihilates the ego? What remains after the ego is annihilated? Only silence. The silence of pure self-awareness. So that is the real teaching of Bhagavan. But he's given us teachings in words to turn our attention within so that we can experience the absolute silence that we actually are. So if we are following this path, if we're trying to follow this path, if we're in the physical presence of Bhagavan, that may help us. Not that we are dependent on that. There's a certain guru who claims to be a disciple of Bhagavan, who teaches that you have to be in the physical presence of a guru in order to attain realization. But guru is not physical. Guru is spiritual. Bhagavan is not... Bhagavan, for 54 years he was teaching us, I am not this body. But still we insist on taking Bhagavan to be this body. We cannot do otherwise. So long as we take ourselves to be a body, we cannot but see Bhagavan as a body. But even though we take this body to be Bhagavan, we should understand that, what the basic principle of Bhagavan teaching is Bhagavan is not limited to this body. That body was a vehicle because our attention is turned outwards. He appeared in our dream to tell us, turn back within. Bhagavan used to say, the physical form of the guru is unreal. But what is brought about by the appearance of that unreal form is the reality. And for that he used to give an analogy. It is believed that elephants are so afraid of lions that if a lion appears in an elephant's dream, the elephant will have such a shock it will immediately wake up. Bhagavan used to say, the human form of the guru is like the lion appearing in the elephant's dream. The lion isn't real. It's just the elephant's mental projection. But the shock of seeing that lion brings the elephant to the state of, relatively speaking, reality, the waking state. Just as the shock of seeing the lion awakened the elephant, the love we have for Guru, for the outward form of Guru and for what he has taught us, and for putting into practice what he's taught us, that love is what will wake us up. Like the shock and fear woke up the elephant, the love for Bhagavan and his teachings, and for actually putting them into practice, that is what will wake us up. So the Bhagavan is not this outward form. So to say that you have to be in the physical presence of a guru is a complete misunderstanding of Bhagavan's teachings. Bhagavan is no less present now than he was when he was living in Tiruvannamalai. Because once a devotee from Tanjore, a lady called Janaki Mata, who was a very ardent devotee of Bhagavan, once she came to Bhagavan, coming from Tanjore, and when she arrived in the ashram, Bhagavan would just have been to the Gosala, the cowshed, to see the cows, as he often did, and he was walking back from a cowshed. And seeing him there, she thought to herself, this is a very good opportunity. So she approached him, she prostrated at his feet and held his feet. And Bhagavan looked down at her and asked her, what are you doing? And she said, I'm holding the feet of my guru. He said, are these the feet of your guru? These feet are perishable. The real feet of your guru is what is shining in you as I. Cling to those feet. Those feet are imperishable, and only those feet will save you. So Bhagavan, the external form of Bhagavan, appeared out externally to turn our attention within. So Bhagavan's presence is always available to us. All we have to do is turn our attention within. Was Bhagavan in the physical presence of Arunachala, his guru, when he attained realization? No, he was in Madurai. The mere thought of Arunachala, which was working in Bhagavan's mind, generated that fear of death and dragged his mind within, turned his mind within. So it's not necessary to be in the physical presence of the Guru, but it is necessary to be in the presence of the Guru, the presence of the Guru being in the center of our own heart. Unless we return to the center of our own heart, unless we turn our attention back and merge back into our source, we cannot, the presence of the Guru is always there, but we are turning a blind eye to it. We are turning away from it. We're looking at the world. We're looking away from the Guru towards the world. Bhagavan tells us, turn back within. That is the way to see the Guru. That is the way to experience grace. That is the way to experience silence. That is the way to see what you actually are. So nowadays, well, not only nowadays, from time immemorial, there have been all sorts of gurus. Some of them may be quite sincere, but a guru can't teach anything more than what they've attained. But there are also a lot of bogus gurus, people who teach things in order to attract disciples. So any guru who says you have to be in the physical presence of Guru is firstly, they don't know what they're talking about, and secondly, they're misleading people. We don't have to be in the physical presence, we have to be in the real presence of Bhagavan. The real presence of Bhagavan is our own heart. So that is what Bhagavan means by silence. I'm not saying that Bhagavan, those who were fortunate to be in Bhagavan's presence, even if after 54 years their ego still seemed to have not diminished, definitely being in Bhagavan's physical presence will have an effect. Bhagavan is doing his work inside. It may not be visible outwardly, but Bhagavan was definitely working in the hearts of those people, just like he is working in the heart of all of us. Bhagavan's grace and his silence and his presence is no less here and now than it was when he was in the body. In fact, the only place where Bhagavan's, truly speaking, the only place where Bhagavan's presence is available is here and now. Because Bhagavan is the ever-present reality, and he's ever-present in us as I. So it's always in the here and now. We have to see what we are here and now. We can't see what we are in future. We can't see what we are in some other place. We have to see what we are here and now. So what is the best time, most auspicious time and most auspicious place for practicing Atma-vichara? Here and now. There's no better time than this present moment. So silence seemed to have had, talking about silence seemed to have had some power. It kept me quiet for a minute at least. So if anyone has any questions.
When you're describing silence, self, God, it sounds like they're terms of the same thing.
They are.
Is silence more eloquent?
Is
Silence more eloquent?
it's the most eloquent language, according to Bhagavan, because it's the only language that can convey what is real. Because what is real, the nature of what is real is silence. But when we talk of language, we talk about God, we talk about Guru, we talk about grace, we talk about silence, we talk about self-awareness, we talk about Atman, Brahman, so many words we have. It sounds like there are so many things. This is the nature of language. Language will always, because the mind multiplies, language also multiplies. It makes, Bhagavan said in another verse, questions and answers are possible only in the language of, in this language of Dvaita, of duality. In Advaita, there are no questions and answers, because there's no one to ask any questions or to answer any questions, to ask any questions or to provide any answers.
It's sort of being negative, it's a sweeping away.
Well, yes. We can, any description of reality in words can only be negative. For example, we use the word infinitive. Infinite. Infinite is a negative term. It means not finite. So the closest we can come to a positive expression is Sat Chit Ananda. Sat means being or what is. Chit means what is aware or awareness. Ananda means happiness. That's the closest we can get to giving a positive description. But even if we want to say, what is meant by Sat, for example, being? We are now. So what's the difference between what we're now experiencing and Sat as it is? Now we're experiencing, we experience the one Sat as many things, and also we experience the state of being as a state of doing, thinking, rising as an ego, talking, all these things. These are all a reflection of, so it's where there's no talking, no thinking, no rising of ego. That is the pure state of Sat, of pure being, just being, summa irupadu. So even to try and understand the significance of the term Satchidananda, we can think of it only in negative terms. So it's where everything is, where the ego and all the phenomena experienced by the ego are absent. That is the reality. But that reality is present even here and now, because the ego couldn't seem to exist if we were not if there wasn't the fundamental awareness, I am, the false awareness, I am Michael, or I am this body, or I am this person, couldn't appear. So we always have to go back to the source. What is the source? The source is I am. The source is what we actually are. To find it, we have to turn our attention back within. Even within and without is a imperfect way of saying it, because our mind is now facing away from ourselves. We call that looking outwards. When we face back towards ourselves, we call it looking inwards. But actually, when we experience what we actually are, there's no in or out. So the root of all duality is the ego. And from the ego arises thoughts, and from thoughts arise words. So words will always be only concerning duality. But words cannot capture non-duality. So only silence can convey the truth. And in order to understand the truth that Bhagavan is always conveying through silence, we have to be silent. And to be silent, we have to cease rising as an ego. It's not just sitting there trying to make the mind free of thoughts, because even that is a thought. The only way to free ourselves from thoughts is to cut up the root of thoughts. The root of thoughts is the first thought. The thought, I am so-and-so. The thought called I, as Bhagavan often referred to it. That is the ego. Why is it the root of all other thoughts? Because the ego is the one thought that thinks all other thoughts. No other thought is aware of itself or of anything else. The only thought that is aware both of itself and of everything else is the ego. So that is the root of everything. But that's why Bhagavan is a doctor who goes to the root of the problem. The whole problem arises because of the ego. All problems arise. Do we experience any problem in sleep? Does anyone have any complaints about the state of sleep?
Yes.
What problem do you have?
I have insomnia.
That's not a problem with sleep. That's a problem of not sleeping.
Well, I mean, it's related to sleep.
Yes. It's related to sleep, but when you're suffering from insomnia, wouldn't you like to sleep?
Yes.
And when you're sleeping, do you have any complaints?
Well, I don't always enjoy sleep.
You don't?
No. I have too many, weird thoughts in my sleep.
Then you're not sleeping, you're dreaming.
Yes.
When I'm talking about sleep, I mean actual sleep, where the mind is completely absent, no thoughts.
But I mean, it's all one, isn't it?
Well, it is all one ultimately, but to see everything as one, we have to see ourselves first. Because sleep is a state of perfect oneness. I'm talking about dreamless sleep here.
Dreamless.
Yeah, is a state of perfect oneness. As soon as the
I
ego...
thought you were supposed to go beyond sleep.
Where to go beyond sleep? According to Bhagavan, sleep is a state of perfect self-awareness. Sleep appears to be defective. The only defect in sleep, the only problem with sleep, is we come out of it again. In verse 13 of Upadeshundya, Bhagavan says, there are two types of subsidence of mind, laya and nasa. What subsides in laya will rise again. What dies will not rise again. So the difference between manolaya and sleep is manolaya, and any state of manolaya is in effect just a state of sleep. The difference between sleep and jnana, the only difference is that we come out of sleep again. We come out of manolaya. That is the problem. So the problem is not in sleep itself. The problem is the fact we come out of it. Who is it who has come out? If we investigate that, if we investigate this ego which rises out of sleep, in either waking or dream, if we investigate it keenly enough, we will see that it doesn't exist. Then we will see that we've never come out of sleep, and sleep will then be found to be the eternal state. That's why there's one verse in Guru Vachakavai when Bhagavan says, when all the impure vasanas that drag the mind outwards, when they are destroyed, we'll find that sleep itself is Turia Tita, or Atita Turia, the transcendent state of Turia. Turia literally means the fourth state, but Bhagavan has said in another verse, it's actually the only state.
I thought sleep was supposed to be an unconscious state, not a conscious state.
That is what we generally suppose. But are you not aware that sometimes you sleep? Sometimes you're not dreaming or awake. In order to be aware that we are sometimes asleep, we must have been aware in that state. Supposing just for the sake of argument, let us say sleep is a completely a state of absolute unconsciousness. We're not at all aware in sleep. Let us suppose for argument. How could we be aware of that state? We would, if there's a waking or dream state, and then there's a sleep, and then waking or dream state, if we were not at all aware in this gap, we would just be aware of an unbroken succession of alternating states of waking and dream. The fact that we all know that we have a third state, a state in which we are not, there are two states in which we're aware of phenomena, waking and dream. There's another state in which we are not aware of any phenomena. That is sleep. But we're aware that we are in a state.
What is Turia?
Turia is a Sanskrit word, but simply means the fourth.
Means
The fourth. Fourth. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I thought Turia was a third. And
No.
there was a fourth one.
No. There are two terms used. Turia means fourth. Turia Tita literally means beyond the fourth. But Bhagavan has said Turia and Turia Tita are one and the same, and that is the only state that actually exists. But Bhagavan says it's only for those who experience these three passing states of waking, dream and sleep, but it's called the fourth. But actually it's our real state. So Turia is a state of pure self-awareness. So is sleep. The difference between Turia and sleep, well, actually there's no difference, but from our perspective as an ego in waking and dream, they seem to be different because what's the problem in sleep? We come out of it again. That's the only difference between sleep and Atma-vichara, Turia, the fourth state of pure self-awareness. The only difference is we come out of it again. Who is it who comes out? The ego. Investigate this ego and we'll see that there's no such thing. Therefore we have never, when we attain Atma-vichara, we will know that we never had come out at all as an ego. So then we will understand that sleep is our eternal state.
Actually, we are aware in sleep because we hear the alarm. Otherwise, how can we hear the alarm?
Well,
so that shows
we hear the alarm only after waking.
But it wakes us up, which shows
Well,
that there's something that is picking up with the alarm.
From one perspective, yes. From the perspective that this world is real, but according to Bhagavan, we wake up and project the sound of the alarm.
See, in my experience, like for example, if I'm meditating, sometimes I'll fall asleep.
Yeah.
But that doesn't feel like a very enlightened state. It feels like a kind of a dozy, kind of lethargic state, that's sleep.
Well, doziness is still is a state sort of, it's a state, doziness, so long as we're feeling dozy, we're not actually asleep. We're in a state of sort of, our present state is a dream. Every state in which we experience phenomena is a dream. Sometimes the phenomena seem very, very solid. Like now, everything seems very solid because we are so strongly attached to this body. But because we're strongly attached to this body seems very real. Therefore, everything else seems real. When we're dozy, we're losing our hold on this body. So we're in a sort of in a state, whereas this is a fully flourished state of dream, we're in a sort of semi-flourished state of dream. But when we actually fall asleep, when we're actually asleep, we don't feel dozy.
Interesting, I never thought of it like that.
Yeah.
I was just wondering from what Marianne was saying, maybe this is sort of a confusion, that what, I understand what you're saying, this is absolutely right, but usually the way it's said, I mean, that sometimes people explain it, and I think this is perhaps what Marianne means, is that they say that when as you start practicing and become more and more sort of grounded in self-awareness, become more self-aware, then say when you are awake and you fall asleep, you sort of retain that kind of base awareness, and you continue to have that self-awareness in sleep, and when you wake up, it's all just continuing.
Well, yes.
Whereas what happens to us normally is that we seem to just flip into sleep,
Yeah.
and then we flip awake, and we don't have that kind of clarity of self-awareness as a solid thing that stays throughout. So I think this is what you meant.
I don't quite understand.
No, I think what she meant is actually something slightly different. But because doziness is where we are fully awake. When we're fully awake, we are fully rooted in this body. We very strongly feel this body is I. But when we are very tired, we begin to we no longer have the energy to cling so firmly to this body. So we begin to lose our grip on this body, as it were. So we are then in only a half awake state or half dreaming state. And that is what we call doziness. But what you were saying about by practicing self-attentiveness, by practicing this path of Atma-vichara, we become more and more familiar with our self-awareness. We become more and more clearly aware that self-awareness is something distinct from the body and everything. Not fully, we don't see that fully at first, but we get a greater clarity of self-awareness. It is then much easier for us to understand what Bhagavan means when he says that sleep is a state of pure self-awareness. We're able to recognize that. Whereas for most people, many people find it very, very difficult to get their head around the idea that sleep is a state of awareness, because they take awareness to be awareness of phenomena. Sure, we're not aware of any phenomena in sleep. But even when we're not aware of phenomena, we are still aware. Because we're constantly attending to phenomena, the awareness of phenomena seems to us very real. But the more we attend to our fundamental self-awareness, that becomes more and more real, and we're able to recognize that is underlying all experiences, both the presence of phenomena in waking and dream and the absence of phenomena in sleep. So it's easier for us to recognize that sleep is actually a state of pure self-awareness the more we practice this path that Bhagavan has taught us. That's why sometimes when people, it's a thing that people often ask me questions about, and some people just are not ready to accept that sleep is a state of self-awareness. And I say, well, the only solution then, practice what Bhagavan has taught. When you practice more and more, it will sooner or later become clear to you that sleep is a state of awareness. Then people say, then will I remember sleep? Well, what is there to remember? All we experience in sleep is I am. Even now we experience I am. The problem is why we are not able to clear, though sleep is a state of clear self-awareness, pure self-awareness, Bhagavan says, it seems unclear to us now because the same I am that we experienced in sleep, we're experiencing now, but now we're experiencing it unclearly as I am this person. So because our present awareness of I am is not clear, we are not able to, we don't have a clear impression of the clarity of self-awareness that we experienced in sleep. So the whole problem is the rising of the ego. The ego is there only in waking and dream. So the problem, even when we say, oh, sleep is different, sleep is manolaya, because we come out of it. Even that is true only from the point of view of the ego in waking and dream. So actually, there is no difference in the actual experience of manolaya and manonasa. There's no difference. The difference is only from the perspective of the ego, which has come out of manolaya, which has come out of sleep.
Can I ask you one thing? For example, the way, so say for example, but his self-awareness in sleep is the same. Yes, it would be the same self-awareness that I have now in my sleep, except that I sort of think of sleep when I'm awake as a kind of a darkness, a very pleasant darkness.
Yeah.
Right? But that's
It seems darkness because we take all this to be light. We take the phenomenal awareness to be a state of light. That is why Turia is sometimes called wakeful sleep. It's even the sleep we are experiencing every day actually is also wakeful sleep. But from the perspective of the waking or dream state, it seems to be a state of darkness. Yeah. Because if we could recall now what we experienced in sleep, we would be, because what we experienced in sleep was only ourselves. So if we could recall that now, we'd be experiencing ourselves as we actually are, the ego would be finished.
His life would be a lot more pleasant.
Yes, life without the ego.
This is just more of an intellectual question, but jnanis or wakings are not supposed to need very much sleep, are they? I'm just thinking on an energetic point of view.
Okay.
Because, I go to sleep because I don't have any energy, I feel tired, right? Now, when I'm meditating or save my energy, the great thing is they have loads of energy, don't they? So they don't really, I don't know why they don't need it.
Okay, well, first thing to clarify, when we ask a question like that, we are taking the great being, we're taking Bhagavan or any jnani to be a body. The jnani is not a body. Bhagavan often used to say, Jnana me jnani. That means jnana alone is the jnani. So the jnani is nothing, jnana means self-awareness. So the jnani is nothing but self-awareness. We take the jnani to be a person, and you're now talking about the jnani as if the jnani is a person. This is all true only in our perspective. But so I will answer it from this perspective, from the ego perspective. Yes, we see Bhagavan, he seems to have infinite energy. Well, not infinite energy, but he seems to be more alive than we are. Why? Because he's constantly in touch, he's constantly in the source. So we go to, why we fall asleep every night? Because we're tired. If we consider our body is like a machine, like a car, and our mind is like a computer, it processes information. If you switch off, supposing there's a car needs petrol or some power to run on. A computer also needs power, it needs electricity. It doesn't regain its power simply by switching it off. If the battery in your PC has run out and you don't have a mains connection, you can't just switch off the PC and wait for 8 hours and switch it on again. Hey presto, it's got its power back. It needs to have a source. You need to plug it into the wall so the battery in the PC recharges. We constantly have that problem with mobile phones. They run out of power. We have to plug them in again. They have to recharge. So recharging a mobile phone is like putting petrol in a car. You have to put something in order for it to. But how the mind regains energy just from keeping quiet? It must be deriving that energy from some source. When we fall asleep, we reach a point where we're just too tired, even if we have so many things we want to do, we're so enthusiastic, we're reading a very interesting book or we're watching a very interesting film, but we're just too tired, the sleep overpowers us. Because we just don't have the energy to continue. We sleep for a few hours and we wake up bright and fresh again. Where we get that power from? It is because the mind goes back to its source, but it derives energy from sleep. So the source of all energy is ourself, the pure self-awareness that we actually are. Because the jnani is always established in that pure self-awareness, they have constant supply of energy. But because the jnani appears to us to be a person with a body, Bhagavan appears to sleep. But people say, but when Bhagavan was Bhagavan never had a private life at all. He always lived a completely open life, so people could enter the hall in which Bhagavan lived at any time of the day or night. So, and people, in the early days, people used to sleep around Bhagavan, so people would sleep in the hall, Bhagavan would be on his couch. If someone wakes up, if they look at Bhagavan, he will appear to be asleep. But if they stir a little, Bhagavan is at once alert. So people used to ask Bhagavan, Bhagavan, are you actually sleeping? Bhagavan said, yes, I'm always sleeping. Even now I'm sleeping. The waking dream and sleep of the jnani are all only in our view because we take the jnani to be the body. But according to Bhagavan, there's a verse in which he said, he compares the jnani to a person sleeping in a cart. If someone's in a bullock cart, they don't know whether the cart is moving, or whether the bullocks are standing still, or whether the bullocks are unyoked, because he's asleep. Bhagavan says the jnani is like the sleeper. The jnani who is asleep in the body is not aware of the activity of the body, that's waking and dream, the sleep, which is like the bullock standing without moving, and the nishta, the seeming state of samadhi that Bhagavan was in, for example, in Patala, where that's like when the bullocks are unyoked. For the jnani, they're asleep in the body, they're not aware of any of these differences. So the state Bhagavan was in when he was in Patala, where he was not aware even of the insects biting his thighs, he was not aware when they lifted his body because so much bleeding and pus from his thighs, his body had stuck. The pus had stuck him to the ground. When they lifted him up, all fresh blood came out. He wasn't aware of that. They carried him out and placed him under the Illipe tree. But one wasn't aware of any of that. That's in our view. So he was in such a deep state of nishta, of self-absorption. But according to Bhagavan, for him, that state was no different to the state when he's answering our questions, seems to be thinking, seems to be writing Uladu Napadu, is asking people, hearing about someone's marriage that has taken place, or reading the newspaper. For Bhagavan, it's all exactly the same. Because these are all actions of the body. These differences are there for a body. That's why Bhagavan said, sometimes in Advaitic texts, there's a huge amount of complication and unnecessary concepts, which are rather confusing. One concept which is there is called the Sapta Jnana Bhumika, the 7 stages of jnana. And the first 3 are stages of aspiration, on the path, basically. The last 4 is Brahma Vid, Brahma Varya, Brahma Vidvarya, Brahma Varishta, or something. I can't even remember the name of the tongue. There are 4 states. People ask Bhagavan, which of these is the highest? Bhagavan said they're all exactly the same. For the jnani, there's no difference. But in Bhagavan's life, he exemplified all of them, because what the state Bhagavan was in when he was in Patala was the Brahma Varishta, that is what is called the 7th state. The state he was in later on when he was answering questions and everything is the state of Brahma Vid. And at other stages in his life, he exemplified all those. The Brahma Varishta is completely unaware of, in our view, completely unaware of the world. He's just like Bhagavan in Patala. The Brahma Vidvarya, or whatever it is partially aware. They'll seem to wake up sometimes and eat food and then go back into absorption, into self-absorption. There was a devotee of Bhagavan called Tinay Swami who seemed to be very much in that state.
Was he a jnani?
Yeah. Bhagavan said to him one word, Iru, be. And that established him in that state. There are other jnanis who are a little bit more aware of the world, but they may act a bit like Seshadri Swami. he acts in a strange way, acts a bit like a madman. And then the fourth one, it will appear completely normal. Could be it could be you or anyone here could be in such a state, and we wouldn't know it.
And they are jnanas.
They're all jnanas. For them, there's absolutely no difference in the state. This is all, Bhagavan said, all these differences are according to the prarabdha of that body. But for the jnani, there is no prarabdha because there's no body, no mind. So all differences exist only in the view of the mind. Are we aware of any differences in sleep? No. It's only when the ego rises the differences come into existence. Because we take the jnani to be a person, all this confusion about, and people say, "Oh, how can you say? How can it be said that the jnani is not aware of anything?" We see Bhagavan, he answers questions, he does this, he does that, because we're taking that body to be Bhagavan. But Bhagavan says, "I am not this body."
But from our perspective, it's quite difficult to tell who is a jnani and who is.
We can't tell. When people used to ask Bhagavan, "Is so and so a jnani?" Bhagavan said, "There's only one jnani, and you are that." So Bhagavan would never entertain all this discussion of who is jnani. Bhagavan said, "Jnana alone is the jnani, and you are that. See yourself, and then you'll see the jnani. Until you see yourself, you cannot see any jnani."
Just on a practical level, it's a bit of a problem, isn't it, when you've got all these gurus around and then all these devotees around, and
The real guru, what will the real guru teach you? The real guru will teach you see yourself. If they teach you that, they're teaching you what Bhagavan has taught us. What Bhagavan has taught us is sufficient. If they're teaching anything other than see yourself, better to avoid them. There are lots of gurus teaching lots of things, but if they don't say, see yourself, if they say, come to me, I will give you enlightenment, run away from them.
We teach see yourself in one form or another, but
yeah, but they mix a lot of other things with it.
I don't know, I don't go visit them anymore. But
yeah, but I think you visited lots of them in your time.
And from my point of view, the way that I would make a decision whether to hang around or not, put it that way, would be if I felt some form of inner peace. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know whether, it seems to me that without having had that experience, that, inner connection,
Yeah.
then it's like we're like amazing stuff,
Yes.
aren't we? So, you say, well, look, experience yourself, but most of us
Yeah.
need some kind of guidance, or I don't know,
Okay.
something.
Sometimes people used to say to Bhagavan, when I'm here in your presence, I'm so peaceful. But when I go away, slowly the effect of your presence slips away. Bhagavan said, yes, what is induced by something external to yourself will always be temporary. If you want to make it permanent, you can make it permanent only by practice, only by the peace you experience here, you should be able to experience wherever you are. And that you can experience only by turning your attention within. That is the way to make what you gain here on a temporary basis permanent. So Bhagavan is always pointing our attention back to ourselves. Because the whole problem is that we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. By rising as an ego, we are mistaking ourselves to be something other than what we are. So the only solution to the ego is to see what we actually are. The ego is a wrong knowledge of ourselves, an erroneous awareness of ourselves. An awareness of ourselves is something other than what we actually are. So we need to be aware of what we actually are. In order to be aware of what we actually are, we have to look at ourselves. We have to turn our attention back within to see what we actually are. That is the only solution. Otherwise we can come and sit in Bhagavan's presence, enjoy the peace for a while, go back to the world and again get caught up in everything. The people say, people came and attained realization in the presence of Bhagavan. That may be. Tinay Swami, Bhagavan said one word and he attained it. There may be, we don't know how many people attained realization, either in Bhagavan's presence or either following Bhagavan's teaching. But those who attained Jnana in Bhagavan's presence, it wasn't merely because of his presence, it's because they followed what he taught us, which is term within.
Yes, but maybe it was like karma as well. Maybe they were already quite
Jnana has nothing to do with karma.
No.
Karma is an action. Karma is finite. Jnana is infinite. How can a finite action give an infinite fruit? Jnana has nothing to do with karma. Karma, the fruit of karma are only for the ego. So whatever, if you do good karmas, you will experience good fruit. If you do bad karmas, you'll experience bad fruit. But however many good karmas you do, you cannot attain jnana, because who is doing the karma and who is experiencing the fruit? Bhagavan says in verse 38 of Arunachala, if we are the doer of actions, we will experience the resulting fruit. But if we investigate who is the doer of action, all the three karmas will slip away. Why it will slip away? Because the doer will slip away. Only by eradicating the ego, we can free ourselves from all karma. So karma cannot lead, he says very clearly in the first few verses of Upadesh Undiyya, Vinayam Vilevu the fruit of karma will pass away, but remaining as seeds, it will cast us into the ocean of action. Therefore, action cannot give liberation, he says. So, we cannot attain jnana as a result of karma. Karma has nothing to do with jnana.
What I mean is that you can work through all your karmas and you're kind of almost there.
We can never work through our karmas, because the more we do karma, the more we are building up more and more fruit. You can never work through karma. The only way to free ourselves from karma is to free ourselves from the karta, the doer, the ego. And we can free ourselves from the ego only by knowing what we actually are. So Bhagavan used to say, prarabdha affects only the outward turned mind, not the inward turned mind. Prarabdha determines what we are going to experience so long as our attention is turned outwards. But prarabdha can never prevent us turning our attention within. That's why Bhagavan wrote in that note to his mother, according to the destiny, the prarabdha of each person, he who is for that, being in there, that means in the heart of each one of them, will make them act. Literally it means will make them dance, like a puppet master. Prarabdha will make us do whatever actions we are to do. Supposing you were to, supposing it was your destiny to earn a PhD. You can't earn a PhD without studying very hard and writing thesis and all these things. So if it's your destiny to earn a PhD, you'll be made to do all the actions that are necessary to do that. That will be your prarabdha. So we will be made to do whatever actions are necessary for us to experience our prarabdha. If it's my prarabdha to be run over by a bus, I will, at that moment I'll think I can cross the road quickly, and I'll run across the road and be hit by the bus. Because it's a foolish decision that to run in front of a bus. But if it's my prarabdha to be run over by the bus, my mind will be made to do that. That is what is called in Sanskrit, buddhi karma anusarini, the intellect, the mind going after the karma. That is being dragged by the karma. In Tamil there's a similar term, vidimati sellam. That is the destiny driving the intellect.
Well, so you suggested that if I were not identified with the mind, even though my mind would say, go and run over the...
Well, let me come now, I'll clarify. So what Bhagavan said, in the first sentence he says, we'll be made to do whatever actions are necessary according to our prarabdha. And then he says, that which is not to happen, that which is not to happen will not happen, however much effort one makes. That which is to happen will not stop, however much obstacle one makes. Those two sentences imply, though what is to happen is going to happen, though we'll be made to do whatever actions by body, speech and mind are according to our prarabdha, will be made to do, our free will is also there. We are now experiencing a certain destiny. We can either like it or dislike it, or we can just be indifferent to it. So we're constantly reacting. We're constantly trying to avoid the unpleasant things and to experience pleasant things. So we're constantly, because of our own individual will, our likes and dislikes, we are constantly trying to avoid unpleasant things. Let me just finish this. We're constantly trying to avoid unpleasant things and to experience pleasant things. So at the same time that we're body, speech and mind are being driven by prarabdha, they're also being driven by our free will. So both of these two forces are acting in our life. What we do by our free will cannot change what we are destined to experience. But there is a way to avoid, there is one way we can avoid experiencing the prarabdha. So long as our attention is turned outwards, what we are destined to experience, we will always experience. Bhagavan says after those two sentences, saying that what is to happen will happen, no matter how much you try to stop it. What is not to happen, he said, what is not to happen will not happen however much effort one makes. What is to happen will not stop how much one tries to. So we cannot change prarabdha in any way. It's going to happen. What we are destined to experience, we will have to experience. Iduve tinnam, this is certain. He doesn't actually say this, we have to experience it. He said it's going to happen. Iduve tinnam, this is certain. Then he says, ahalim monamai ilake nandru. Therefore, being quiet is good. That is the clue. We can either rise with our will as an ego to try and change the prarabdha in some way or other, or we can keep quiet. How can we keep quiet? We come back to the subject we started from. What does Bhagavan mean by mona? He doesn't mean we just keep quiet. He doesn't mean we just avoid doing any action by body, speech or mind, because if we're destined to act, we'll be made to act. So what Bhagavan means by being silent is not refraining from doing any action by body, speech or mind. What he means is refraining from rising as the ego. And we can refrain from rising as the ego only by turning our attention within. So if we want to avoid prarabdha, the only way to avoid prarabdha is not to attend to it, not to attend to anything that is happening, not to face outwards, turn our attention back towards ourselves, merge back into our source. That is liberation. So liberation will not be brought about by any action, or by Alistair putting his hand on my shoulder. I am not going to spare you, Alistair. I'm not going to spare you till I've had my say. Destiny has nothing. People say, "Oh, it was Bhagavan's destiny. He got to realization when he was young." It's nothing to do with destiny. Destiny is a fruit of our past actions. What Bhagavan experienced is not a fruit, or is not a karma phala. It is because by the Atma-vichara, the spiritual practice that he had been doing in the previous lives, he had a very, very strong satvasana. Vishaya vasanas, Vishaya means phenomena. So Vishaya vasanas are what prompts us to, what our liking to experience things other than ourselves, are Vishaya vasanas. The satvasana is the liking just to be. In Bhagavan, that satvasana was very strong. So when that fear of death overcame him, and he turned his attention within, he was able to immediately be established in that state of just being, and that consumed all then and there, the ego, along with all its Vishaya vasanas, was consumed once and for all. So it is only by, so what Bhagavan was a result of what he had done in previous lives, but not because of karmas he had done in the previous lives, because of the Atma-vichara he had done in previous lives. Because Atma-vichara is not an action, it's a state of just being. When we turn our attention within, the doing ego subsides.
Enough.
Silence, silence.
Bhagavan describes in the Arunachala Ashkatam, the 8 verses on Arunachala, that when he first came to Arunachala, which he described as being mysterious in its power, beyond human understanding, when he came...
Please, speaker.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll start again. In Bhagavan's little poem, the Arunachala Ashkatam, which is 8 verses on Arunachala, in the first verse he describes as Arunachala as being mysterious in its power, beyond human understanding. And he said that when he came close to it, he understood that it meant absolute stillness. And I wonder if there's any kind of distinction between silence and stillness in this.
Absolutely, yes.
Yes.
Achala means, chala means movement, achala means unmoving. So that's why a hill is called achala, where it's unmoving. So Arunachala, motionlessness is there in the name.
Right.
So silence is in the name.
But in its action, is silence the same?
Its action is silence.
Yes.
Its action is doing without doing.
Doing without doing. Good. Well, that's a simple answer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's very moving, that
Yeah.
that verse in particular.
Yeah. The verse ends Achala Makande. I saw it standing as Achala. It can mean either I saw it standing motionless or I saw it standing as a hill.
Yes. Yes.
So it has
It
two
says,
meanings.
yes, it says that in Arthur Osborne's footnote.
Yeah.
Its translation.
Yeah.
Also, Alan, here, Bhagavan also says that in that same one, that why do you assume that Bhagavan or God should be only in human form? Bhagavan is in the form of hill. God is in the form of hill.
Yes.
And if you think a human body, health, Bhagavan, saint, can transmit that power of energy, the same power of energy you get from the hill, which is also God. That's what it means.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you don't even have to be there.
Yeah.
Near Smaranat Arunachalam.
It can be there because though it looks like from London, Trivandrum is far away, but when you take the entire universe, it's very minuscule. It's just like a small, just 1 centimeter away.
It's even closer than that.
When you take the entire multiple universe,
It's even closer than that.
close.
Arunachalamena ahame. Arunachala is I.
Yeah.
Bhagavan himself has said.
I suppose it amounts to Arunachala sort of being God in its most concentrated form. Is that one way of...
Yes, yes. The physical form of the hill is a physical manifestation of God.
Yes,
And since the real nature of God is silence,
yes.
it embodies that silence that is the real nature of God.
And it does. I found this out for myself, actually. That was the one quality that I could never sort of understand what it was about Arunachala. There was something compelling about it.
Yeah.
But the last time I was there, when I walked up to Skandashram on my own, I suddenly realized that there are some points on that path where there is absolute stillness, and it's very palpable. It kind of stops you, and stops you in your tracks, and you just sort of either stop completely or wander very slowly.
Yeah. That's outwardly, but inwardly it also stops us in our tracks.
Yes.
It stops the ego from
Yes,
rising.
yes.
The story of the origin of Arunachala, it was when Brahma and Vishnu were overcome by ego, each saying that it is.
Yes.
So the whole purpose of Arunachala is eradicating ego. as Bhagavan says in the first verse of Arunachala, Ashtakam. Arunachala Arunachala mena ahame nene pava ahate vera rupaya Arunachala. That is, you eradicate or root out the ego.
Yes, yes.
So that is what Arunachala is about. And only when the ego is eradicated, what remains is silence.
Yes.
That is the real Arunachala. So when you said Arunachala is, it seems thousands of miles away, but compared to the size of the universe, it's very close. Arunachala is even closer. It's in your very heart.
Yeah, exactly.
There are other holy places in the world which seem to have a similar power. And there are places, Christian places, shrines, and Islamic shrines, I suppose, and Buddhist shrines, which have similar powers. But it is exceptionally powerful in the case of Arunachala. That's my experience, anyway.
Yeah.
Depends on one's samskaras as well.
Yes.
If you've got Christian samskaras, you'll probably tune in more to the Christian shrines.
I'm
Yeah.
sure that's true. Must be true.
And if we've got samskaras towards Bhagavan, we're attracted to Arunachala.
Yes.
So it's got to be stillness, silence, and love. They're all one and the same thing.
They're all one and the same.
Yes.
And you are that.
Indeed.
Particularly so in the case of Mary.
And Alistair, of course.
And all of us.
We use so many words: God, grace, Guru, silence, Achala, motionlessness, all are referring to one and the same thing, which is what we actually are.
Is it a resonance that is resonating so fast that it is standing perfectly still?
You can say that, yes, yes.
That's how I see it.
Yeah.
My God, that's fast. It's heavy.
It's sometimes described as dynamic stillness.
Yeah, when you go into it, it's heavy.
Heavy, you say.
Heavy, yes, you feel it.
Yeah. That is the meaning of the word guru. Guru means heavy.
Is it?
Yes. Lagu means light. So the ego is light. The guru is heavy. So if we attach ourselves to guru, we'll be pulled down to the depth.
Pulled down to our inner depths.
Yeah, of course.
But how to stay there?
Cling firmly to guru, who is shining in your heart as I.
What is jiva?
Jiva means soul, the light.
Is it different from God and Guru?
Ultimately, there are no differences. Jiva Brahmaikya, the oneness of Jiva and Brahman. So, but Jiva is the ego. What the ego essentially is, what is the ego? The ego is the feeling, I am this person. This person comes and goes. When we're asleep, we don't feel I am this person. What we feel in all the three states, what we're aware of in all the three states is I am. But this body, and now I feel I am this body. In dream, some other body I'm experiencing as myself. So all these are upadhis. Upadhis means adjuncts. What comes, what is added to us, but it's not what we actually are. So if we remove all the upadhis, Bhagavan says in Upadesha Undiyā, Irkum ekayal, isa jivagal, oru porole ava undipara, upadi unave verundipara. That means in their being nature, in their irkam yeke, in their nature which just is, their isness, God and jivas are one poro, one substance. Only the upadi unavu, the awareness of adjuncts is different. Now we're aware of ourselves as I am this person. That is the adjunct. And so we are aware of God. God is another person, someone other than ourselves. That difference seems to, the difference between ourselves and God arises because we have limited ourselves as this person. So in the next verse he says, Tane upadi vittu ovadu isan tane unavadam, I can't remember the exact word. That seeing oneself without adjuncts is seeing God. Isan tane olivada, because God exists as oneself, or shines as oneself. So what God actually is only ourself. But so long as we limit ourselves as a person, God seems to be other than ourselves. So the very rising of the ego is the birth of duality. The difference in ourself and God, ourself and the world, all these multiple differences we see, all appear only when we rise as the ego. So the ego is the root of everything. And the ego rises by attaching, by urupatriundam, it comes into existence by grasping form. Form means any phenomena, not only physical things, but even mental phenomena, thoughts, everything. Anything other than ourselves is a form. Because what the ego has no form of its own, so Bhagavan calls it the formless phantom ego. Though it has no form of its own, it cannot rise without clinging to a form and taking that form to be itself. So it's always clinging to forms. If it tries to cling to itself, since it is formless, it will merge back into its source. And what will then remain, that is God. God, silence, Guru, grace, call it whatever, Arunachala, Bhagavan, call it whatever you want. But that is what we really are.
I always find this quite difficult. I asked you this question before once.
Yes.
And when you say that when the ego has to grasp a form,
Yes.
and having grasped it, it grows fat,
Yeah.
as it says in the 40 verses. But it's not actually grasping a form, it's actually projecting a form, isn't it?
It's projecting, because in the very next verse he says, ahande undain anatum undahum, ahande indrel indru anatum, ahande yavamam. That means if the ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If the ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. The ego itself is everything. So the ego is like a seed. It rises and it sprouts as all this multiplicity. So according to Bhagavan, all this is only an expansion of the ego.
Yes, I understand that. So it's, I mean, rather, I just think it's a bit sort of confusing in the way that it's put. I mean, it simply means
Maya is very confusing.
Yes, everything is a projection. It simply
Yes,
means that
yes.
having projected something, it's caught in that projection and can't get
Well,
out
yeah,
of
yeah.
it.
But the projecting and the grasping are not two separate things. They are simultaneous.
Right, exactly.
Because how does the formless ego grasp anything? It's got no hands or legs to grasp anything. It grasps in its awareness by attending to things other than itself, by looking away from itself, outside.
Yes.
I mean, the projecting and the looking outside are one and the same thing.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
And in sort of growing fat, I mean, it's trapped in its own illusion. The ego is immediately trapped in its own illusion and just goes on getting fatter and fatter in that illusion.
Dream is a very good example of this. In dream we perceive so many things. How do we perceive all those forms? We project them. But are we projecting and then perceiving? No, the projection is itself the perceiving.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. thinking, we talk about thinking. What actually is thinking? When we think, we are forming thoughts. But where are we forming thoughts? In our own awareness. So the forming of a thought and the being aware of a thought are one and the same thing.
Yes.
We don't form a thought and then become aware of it.
No. No,
So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's why the people who, sorry, can I just say one thing? People who say there's thinking but there's no thinker, it's doubly absurd. Firstly, it's absurd is you can't have any action without an act, something that is acting. So there has to be a thinker, or there can't be thinking. And secondly, you cannot deny, there's only thinking if you're aware of thinking. And being aware of thinking is the same as thinking. You can't separate the being aware of thoughts from the act of thinking.
No.
With the forming of the thoughts and being aware of it is one and the same thing.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That must be so.
Yeah. Like some philosophers say about the Descartes' famous saying, cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. They say it's not valid to say I think. All you can say is there is thinking.
Yeah.
But that's a very common objection to what he said. They say all you can say is there's thinking, but he is saying I think, and therefore he is inferring the existence of I am. That's unjustified. Some philosophers argue. But how can there be thinking without something being aware of that thinking? That thing that is aware of the thinking is I.
So it should be the other way around. I am therefore, I think.
We think, but we couldn't think if we didn't exist. So I mean, Descartes is correct. But what Bhagavan said once about Descartes, when someone asked him about Descartes, he said, yes, the fact that we think is evidence that we exist. But you don't need that evidence, because our existence is so plainly visible. Bhagavan said it is like if a procession, a temple procession or a royal procession is going past and an elephant is there. You see the elephant going in front of you, but you refuse to believe the existence of the elephant until you see the footprints. So thinking that you need to think in order to know that you are is like saying, in order to believe that there's an elephant, I have to see its footprints. You've just seen the elephant. You don't need to see the footprint. So the I am is self-shining. It's always patently obvious to us. Nobody can, philosophers do, but illogically, nobody can doubt their own existence. But even to doubt our own existence, we must exist.
Yes.
But we don't have to doubt and we don't have to think in order to know that we exist, because self-awareness is our very nature.
Yeah.
So self-awareness is the one thing that is so obvious. And it's the one thing that is constant. Awareness of other things appears in waking and dream. No awareness of other things appears in sleep. But in all three states, we're self-aware. That's why we say, I slept. Who is that I? It's the self-awareness was there even in sleep.
Yes. I think, I don't mean to put it down, but what you're saying is pretty obvious. I mean, it's a very simple concept. We don't need any proof.
Yes, it is pretty obvious, but you'll be amazed how many brilliant philosophers are not able to see it. That is, people often use the word intellectual, people who are thinking a lot, reasoning a lot, but the sense in which the Sanskrit term buddhi, and particularly there are two terms in Sanskrit for intellect, commonly used terms. One is buddhi, and the other is vijnana. Both of them signify more than just the reason. The reasoning power is also a function of the intellect. The intellect is more. Vijnana means jnana means knowledge. Vijnana means the ability to distinguish. So, if you think of it, what reasoning is, when supposing I asked you to prove to me that 1 + 1 = 2, How can you actually prove it unless I'm actually able to see the logic that 1 + 1 must equal 2? Its ability to recognize the truth is the function of the intellect. So sometimes, I mean, even if A is equal to C and B is equal to C, we can infer that A is equal to B. That's a simple thing. That's logic. But what logic is the ability to see the logic in that. I mean, the ability to see that has to be the case. So it's what the intellect, the real power of the intellect is the power to recognize the truth in things. That is why it's often said, like in 2 verses in Uludu Naptu, Bhagavan says, in one verse, talking about the practice of Atma-vichara, in one verse he says, Kunda matiyal. Mati means intellect. It's another term used for intellect. Kunda means the sharpened or very focused intellect. And another verse he says, nun matiyal, by a subtle intellect. So the intellect is, and often in older Vedantic literature, talk about the buddhi has to see, the intellect has to see the truth. Right. So why it's stressing the intellect is not stressing the importance of reasoning. I mean, obviously we do have to reason in order to understand the why we cannot. I mean, for example, we all experience ourselves as I am this body. And it's very difficult for us to get over that illusion. But when we start off from the path, we are taught why we cannot be this body. Because this body is something that appears and disappears. We are constant. So by reasoning in that way, we can see, yes, it becomes obvious to us. Though I now seem to be this body cannot be what I actually am. So some reasoning does play a part. That is the manana stage. First there's Sravana. We're told the truth. Then we have to think about it. We have to reason about it. We have to understand why that has to be the case. That's manana. Then nididhyasana is actually putting into practice. The intellect is used, the reasoning power of the intellect is used in the manana stage. But even the reasoning entails an ability to see the truth in things. But once you go to the nididhyasana stage, when you're actually doing the investigation, when you actually turn your attention in, it is the intellect, it's that Jnana, it's that ability to distinguish. And that is all we need to do. Now this feeling, now the awareness and the body, they're mixed together. I experience myself as I am this body. So what vichara is all about is distinguishing, is trying to distinguish I in isolation from everything else. So it is intellectual. Vichara is an intellectual process, not in the sense of a reasoning process, but in the sense of refining our intellect, making our intellect very sharp. That's what Bhagavan says, kunda matya, by a sharp intellect, and nun means a very subtle. So refining our intellect so that we're able to see actually what this I actually is. Now we've confused I with this body. We need to be looking at ourselves more and more keenly so we can actually see ourselves in isolation from everything else.
I got all that. There was quite a lot.
Yeah, so sorry. It's quite a subtle thing, but there's a reason why it is said. It's the intellect that has to see the truth.
Would you say that vijnana is simply discrimination?
It is in a sense, yes. The suffix v in Sanskrit, as in viveka, vijnana, it's very similar to the suffix dis in English, as in discriminate, distinguish, discern. So but what the intellect is, what the vijnana is the power of distinguishing, the power of discerning, the power of seeing, yes, of recognizing, distinguishing the real from the unreal. That is what the satya, asatya, vastu viveka, nitya, anitya, vastuvivika. That means distinguishing the permanent from the impermanent, the real from the unreal. That's what vichara, the V in vichara is also that. It's that distinguishing.
Yes, as Bhagavan often said, distinguishing, not seeing the real as unreal.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Okay. I think Barry.
Yeah. Sorry, Barry.
Yes, it was just at that point I was trying to come in because it seemed to me, but I might be wrong, it seemed to me that actually the explanations you were giving seemed to be almost impossible. That something could project itself and be aware of what it's projecting and stuff like that. It seems to me that the argument is more of a poetic description than actual fact. Or
Well, it's certainly not an actual fact. It's Maya, and Maya means what is not.
right. So, yes,
But it is. But if you think of it in dream, do you agree? But you project everything that you see in a dream, everything that you experience in a dream is a mental projection. Do you agree?
that seems to be it.
Yeah. But the projecting it and the perceiving of it, experiencing of it, are indistinguishable. We perceive it by projecting it, and we project it by perceiving it.
Yes.
Because it's a projection in our own awareness.
Yes, but actually, ultimately, it's not there.
It's not there.
So
But it seems to be there so long as we seem to be this ego. And this ego we seem to be this ego so long as we are seeing anything other than ourselves. That is why the essential clue given by Bhagavan, I mean what Bhagavan says in verse 25 of Uludinapti is so important, because if we understand really what Bhagavan uses words, Bhagavan uses very simple words actually, the word uru patri undam. That uru means form, patri means clinging. Undam comes into existence. So it comes into existence by grasping form. It stands by grasping form. Nikkum simply means it stands. Obviously it means it endures, it persists by clinging to form. Clinging and feeding on forms, he says, feeding. He uses very simple words. Mika ongam. Mika means greatly. Ongam means it flourishes, it expands, so such simple words. And then uru vittu uru patram. Leaving form, grasp form. And then tadin out. It's sought, autum pidicum. It takes flight. It runs away. So he's using such simple words, but what he's explaining there is such a very, very, very profound truth.
Yes, but ultimately what he's trying to explain is that there's nothing. It's trying to explain nothing.
Uru vatra peya hande. It's a phantom. Do phantoms actually exist? Phantoms seem to exist if you don't look at them carefully enough. If you look at the phantom carefully enough, there's no such thing.
Yes, but I mean, struggling to try and understand that verbal explanation is almost...
Who is struggling to understand it? That formless phantom ego. So to really understand what Bhagavan is... That is why the ultimate teaching is only in silence. The words cannot convey it, but the words are a pointer. We cannot understand Bhagavan's teachings unless we put them into practice. We can go on reading after reading all these words, thinking about them and everything, but until we actually put it into practice, we cannot actually really understand. But we will correctly understand Bhagavan's teachings when we cease to exist. So long as we're rising as an ego, our understanding is we haven't actually seen what we vaguely seeing it, we're recognizing yes, it has to be the truth, but we haven't actually seen what Bhagavan is pointing to. When we see what Bhagavan is pointing to, we will disappear. He says in another verse in Ulidinab, a very, very simple word, Un Adol Khan. Un means food. Becoming food is seeing. Becoming a prey to God is seeing God. You cannot remain separate from God and see God. If you want to see God, You have to be swallowed by God.
Yes. See in that sense is a rather unfortunate. Would you say
Well,
it's unfortunate?
it's unfortunate, but in fact, all Bhagavan's teaching, all the words Bhagavan uses are metaphors, ultimately, because what he's talking about is beyond thought. What is beyond thought has to be beyond words. So he's using metaphors. When he says becoming food, we're not God doesn't sit down at the table and eat us as food. but we understand what's behind that. And when he talks about seeing, obviously we don't see God as an object. We don't see ourselves as an object. But Bhagavan often says, see yourself. What do you mean by see yourself? Look and see. Looking and seeing in that case means attending to yourself and being aware of yourself as you actually are. But often it's more effectively conveyed sometimes by the very simple words of look and see. And Bhagavan isn't the first one to say look and see. But exactly the same words Christ uses in Bible. The Bible is actually the words of Christ. He says, they will say, kingdom of God is here and kingdom of God is here. Lo, behold, the kingdom of God is within you. Lo is an old-fashioned English for look. Behold means see. So Christ is saying, look, see, it's there within you.
Actually, lo, what was the phrase?
Lo, behold.
Yes.
That in the King James Bible is how it's translated, and everyone seems to follow that since. But
No, but look and see.
Yeah.
Look and see. I mean, that's actually mentioned in lots of maths textbooks.
yeah,
So you've got this sort of visual proof of some mathematical profundity. You know, when they say, look and see. Oh, well, Douglas Harding, yeah, that's something else, but he's saying the same thing.
but that's what I was just saying about logic. Logic is actually, it's the ability to see. If someone doesn't understand that 1 and 1 is 2, how can you make them understand? They have to be able to see that 1 and 1 is 2. Any logic, you have to be able to recognize why one, I mean, particularly deductive logic, where the truth of one statement entails the truth of another statement. If A equals B and B equals C, then A must equal C. If you can't see that, no one can teach you that. Why logic is so, when we understand the logic of something, we're so sure of it, because we can see it. So it's actually that ability, that is what the intellect is. It's the ability to actually see the truth in things. But we're using our intellect always externally. We have to turn that outward-facing intellect inwards to see what we ourselves actually are.
Yes, what you said there a little bit earlier was, I just read something very similar with the Namalai Swami. He said, basically, I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was something to the effect of, you have to see that you don't exist before you can practice sensibly any sadhana.
Yes.
Do you think that's correct?
Well,
you have to see that you're not really...
yeah, well, we have to be, yes, we have to be ready to doubt what we actually are before we can investigate what we are. We have to be able to see, but we cannot be what we now seem to be. I mean, most people in the world, they're perfectly they're fully convinced that they are a person. And so long as we are convinced that we are this person, if I'm convinced I'm Michael, why should I take to Atma-vichara? Unless I can see, but Michael can't be what I actually am, though I seem to be Michael, though it's very difficult for me to get rid of this experience, this awareness of myself as I am Michael, by thinking about the subject, by thinking about my experience not only in this waking state. In this waking state, I'm always aware of myself as Michael. That's this particular body. But in dream, I'm aware of some other body. Because that body may be doing all sorts of activities in dream, whereas this body isn't doing anything in dream. So it's two different bodies. So since I can be aware of myself in dream without being aware of this body. This body cannot be what I am. And since I'm now aware of myself without being aware of that dream body cannot be I am. So I cannot be any body. Am I then this mind? It's the same mind which now feels I am this body, and in dream feels I am that body. But even this mind is there in waking and dream, but it's not there in sleep. But still I am there in sleep because I slept. So being able to see, but we cannot be any of the things that we take ourselves to be, other than the fundamental awareness. Only when we're able to see that can we actually start on the path of vichara. Unless you're able to understand that you're not the body or mind, how do we do Atma-vichara? Bhagavan says, see yourself, we sit in front of a mirror and look at ourselves. There was a sage, Ramalinga Swami, who said, see yourself, and a group of his disciples who put a mirror there and meditate in front of a mirror because they think that's seeing themselves. So we have to understand what the words mean. So we have to be able to see, but we have to be able to see, but we are not what we seem to be. If we can see that, then only it's meaningful to take to a path of vichara. And we also, unless we're able to understand, but we're not any phenomena, we're only the awareness, when we attend to ourselves, we'll be attending to something other than ourselves. What is called vichara, self-investigation, is actually just trying to be the basic self-awareness that we actually are.
Actually, I met someone once who had a PhD in maths.
Yes.
She used to teach at Birkbeck College, Lee algebra or something. Anyway, she said she recommended me to look in the mirror and look at myself. And she said that you'll find something very strange happens. I never took her up on it, but that's exactly what you've just been saying.
Yeah.
The Swami recommended.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was, it wasn't so long ago.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that person is now teaching.
Yeah, but did you try it?
No.
What's the name? Why not?
I've forgotten the name now.
Let us know next time. Yes.
You want to know next time?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, curiosity.
I might be able to inquire if you're really interested.
Curiosity. That is an interesting term. We are all curious, aren't we? We hear so many things, and all the time our mind is seeking to know new things. But what we have, curiosity is human nature. But we have to turn our curiosity away from all other things. We need to be curious about only one thing. That is, who am I? That is the only curiosity. People come to begin to read Vedanta philosophy. They read, or just generally about yoga or any spiritual thing, they read terms like Nirvikalpa Samadhi. People are so interested to know what is Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Have you experienced Nirvikalpa Samadhi? How to experience Nirvikalpa Samadhi? Did we come here to know about Nirvikalpa Samadhi? We came here to know what we are. So Nirvikalpa Samadhi is irrelevant. So there's only one thing we should be curious about. Who am I? We shouldn't be curious about anything else.
Curiosity killed the cats.
Literally, curiosity, self-curiosity will kill the ego.
There's a perspective which interests me. I don't know how it relates exactly. We're told that the dream we have
Yes,
has been specially prepared for us
yes,
by Ishvara for our spiritual development.
yes,
And it doesn't really exist.
yes,
It's a dream.
yes,
And this dream is projected on the screen of pure consciousness awareness.
yes,
And what we're seeing now, looking at now, is a dream.
yes. But that pure consciousness, that pure awareness, that is our own self-awareness. We are that.
So it's only the awareness that we are. This relates to Sat, Chit, and Anda. This word self confuses the issue a bit. Because our real nature is pure awareness.
Yes,
Consciousness.
yes. But that is yourself. That is yourself. That is you yourself are that.
Yeah.
So if we take self as a separate word and we reify it as something, there's some the self, but we have to realize that is confusing. But if you understand that it is what the word Atman in Sanskrit means, is usually translated as the self. But all Atman means is oneself. It is oneself is Brahman. I myself am Brahman. Aham Brahmasmi. Tattvamasi, you are that. So I think this thing of reifying the meaning of the term Atman is very, very ancient. That is why from the time of Buddhism, or possibly even before that, it was a big dispute among ascetics in India, whether there's Atman or no Atman. But all Atman means is oneself. If you deny Atman, you're denying your own existence. Is there any difference between this chair and itself? The chair is itself. So I am myself. Self is not something separate. Self is what the thing is. If you deny the existence of self, you're denying existence itself.
It's the term self.
It's when you reify it, when you take self to be something other than what you are. Now we think, particularly when Atman is translated as the self with a capital S, we think of something, automatically we think of something other than ourselves. So supposing you're you're involved in a car accident and you're in a court, and the judge asks you, did you drive your car across the red light? If you say, no sir, it was the self who did it. Well, it was the self, it was yourself. It wasn't any other self who did it. So, but we separate, by talking of the self, we are separating ourselves from what we actually are. We're creating a confusion. In Indian languages, there are no capital letters. So there are no capital letters. So Atman, there's no capital self with a capital S. And also there's no article like the in English. So actually there's no word in Sanskrit or in Tamil for the self. In Tamil the word is tan. Tan means oneself. In Sanskrit the word Atman means oneself. Sometimes the word Atman is used to refer to oneself, to what one seems to be individual. Sometimes it is, but since we are only oneself, it doesn't make any difference. But in some contexts, Atman can be referring to the ego. In some contexts, it's referring to Brahman. But ego and Brahman are one and the same thing. Jiva Brahmaikya, the oneness of Jiva and Brahman. It's only the upadhis are different, the adjuncts are different, but what essentially Jiva and Brahman, they're one and the same thing. What the Jiva essentially is just Brahman. So you yourself are that. So words, the mind always creates differences. But we've got to go beyond differences, go to the heart of it. And the heart of it is that we ourselves are that. So we have to see ourselves to see that.
I think it's the words consciousness, awareness, Satchit and Nanda, which is different from self. And this is really important.
But you yourself, when Shiva Prakash Pillai, the first question he asked Bhagavan was, Nanya, who am I? Bhagavan answered, though when Shiva Prakash Pillai noted it down, later he added his own explanation because he'd studied some philosophy while at university. He studied Indian philosophy, so he brought in all the neti business. But that he did for his own clarification. And later Bhagavan said, let it remain there. But Bhagavan said that wasn't what he said. What Bhagavan marked in bold type when he wrote it in an essay form, what his actual words were. Shiv Prakash Pillai asked, who am I? Bhagavan's answer was Arivainan. Arivainan means awareness alone is I. And the next question he asked is, Arivin Sarupam Edu. What is the nature of Arivu, of awareness? Bhagavan replied, Satchidananda. So we are awareness, and the nature of that awareness is Satchidananda. So Satchidananda is just a description of what we actually are.
Yes, I think I prefer that.
You prefer a description to what you actually are?
I prefer Satchidananda.
Satchidananda is just a description. But you are that. So you should be more interested in seeing yourself rather than... But we shouldn't get caught up in the words. We have to... All words are pointers. But ultimately where all words are pointing is back... All the words used by Bhagavan and in ancient Vedic texts, it's all pointing back to yourself. That's why they're called Mahabhagyas, the great saying. The things are pointing out, but you yourself, Tattvamasi, you are that. Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. Prajnanam Brahman, pure awareness. That's your own pure awareness is Brahman. I am Atman Brahman. This self is Brahman. So they're called the Mahabhagyas because they're all pointing us back towards ourselves. We are not to go searching for some Brahman. Find out what you yourself are and you'll find out what is Brahman. Some modern scholars, I mean not modern, just modern, for a long time there's been a tradition in Advaita. Those who nowadays call themselves the traditional Advaitins, they say it's not sufficient to inquire into the meaning of Tvam, you also have to inquire into the meaning of Tat. But if Tat is Tvam, if that is you, if you are that, if you investigate yourself, you'll find out what is Tat. They fail to understand the meaning of the very term. The reason it is said you are that is so stop looking for something outside yourself. What you're looking for is you, is yourself. Look at yourself. Stop searching for Brahman outside yourself.
It's a revelation which trying all these different approaches.
Yes.
And eventually revelation comes.
Yes. But the real revelation will come only when we look within and see what we actually are.
It's the same thing.
But, well, it's not the same thing. We've all heard Bhagavan's teaching. We've all understood this at a certain level. We grasp the theory of it. We're convinced as much as we can be convinced. But we actually have to see it. In order to see it, we have to look within. Yeah. Sorry, you were asking?
Yes, sir. In English, we always use the word ego, which sounds like it's kind of a very well specified. But it's actually like, as it corresponds to a single word in the Indian language, so I'm using several, it translates several different words. Like I think you were just saying that in some contexts, Atman actually means ego.
Yeah. Well, all Atman means is oneself. When we talk about oneself, in some context, we're referring to ego, what we seem to be. Ego is what we seem to be.
Yes.
Brahman is what we actually are. So in some context, when Atman is used, I'm more than Sanskrit, I'm familiar with Tamil. In Tamil, it's an even simpler word, Tan. Tan simply means oneself. And Atman means more or less the same. So Bhagavan, in some verses in Uludunapadu, he says about seeing one, I can't remember the example, but I mean he's using the word Tan, both to refer to, he says Tan, but it's the source of Tan. That's oneself who is the source of oneself. Obviously the source is what we actually are. Oneself, what comes out of that source is the ego. So the same word is used, but we can understand very clearly from the context. If we understand what Bhagavan is talking about, we will understand. And often, for example, the word Atma-vichara. In Atma-vichara, is the word Atma in Atma-vichara, is it referring to the ego, which is what you seem to be, or to what you really are.
So perhaps it's referring to both.
It's referring to, but it's not. It's referring to yourself. It's not referring to either ego or, because when we start the investigation, who is to do Atma-vichara? Brahman doesn't need to do any Atma-vichara. The Atma-vichara is for the ego. The ego investigates itself. So because we seem to be this ego, what we are investigating is ourself, this ego. But what we actually are is Brahman. So when we investigate ourselves, the snake and the rope are not two different things. If you think that it's a snake, Bhagavan will say, look at it very carefully, you'll see it's not a snake. You look at it very carefully, you see it's a rope. So when you're looking, you think you're looking at the snake. What you're actually looking at is a rope. So also when we attend to ourselves, it seems we're attending to ourselves, this ego. But if we look at ourselves keenly enough, if we attend to ourselves keenly enough, we'll see that what we were mistaking to be ego is actually pure self-awareness, which is what we actually are.
Yeah, but so from a very kind of terminological viewpoint, so this ambivalence, so to say, is
Yeah.
also reflected in the fact that in India they would use the very same word.
The very same, like we
But
would.
when you translate it into English, then you actually kind of make the distinction
Well,
between ego and...
Leave side ego for a moment. About the term Atman, it means exactly the same as the English term oneself. When you say oneself, you can be referring to yourself as a person. But also in this context, oneself can also refer to what we actually are.
Yeah. But you would usually say ego.
But, the ego, there are two words in Sanskrit that mean ego. One is ahankara. Ahankara is aham means I. Kara means doer or maker. So it's the I maker. So that's one term. The other term is ahanta. Ta is a suffix which means more or less the same as ness in English. Like in awareness, consciousness, tallness, shortness. It's a term that describes that quality. So ahanta in Sanskrit means I-ness. That is in Tamil, because ahanta, becomes ahande in Tamil, because they don't distinguish between the T and the D, and after an N, the D is a more natural sound in Tamil. So in Tamil it's called ahande. Instead of a long A, it becomes AI. But that's a word Bhagavan most commonly uses. He sometimes uses the term ahankaram, but more usually he uses the word ahande. Ahande simply means I-ness. So it means the same as English. The English word ego comes from what? It's a Latin word. In Latin, ego means I. So all it means is I, but it's used when talking about the ahankara or ahande, it's talking about what we call it ego, the little I. Not that there are two eyes, there's only one eye, but it's what we seem to be is ego, what we actually are is Brahman. And I have to keep silent now, because I've been talking far too much about the subject of silence. This is Maya.